The Plaza Hotel in New York gleamed under the bright lights of a September evening, its marble floors polished until they reflected the crystal chandeliers above. Guests dressed in designer gowns and tuxedos filled the grand ballroom, their voices a mixture of gossip and excitement. This was no ordinary wedding. It was the event of the season, covered by glossy magazines and streamed live to thousands of curious onlookers. At the center of it all stood Caleb Donovan, a man in his mid-30s wearing a perfectly tailored Armani suit. His dark hair was slicked back, his smile confident, and his posture that of someone who believed he had conquered the world. Caleb's startup in artificial intelligence had skyrocketed in value, within just 5 years turning him from a struggling coder into a multimillionaire. Now he basked in the glow of success, eager to show everyone that he had moved on from the woman who once stood by him when he was nothing. Tonight he was marrying Vanessa Monroe, a model known for her magazine covers and extravagant lifestyle. She was beautiful, young, and fashionable, the perfect trophy wife. To elevate his image even higher, Caleb looked at the rows of golden chairs filled with celebrities, investors, and journalists. Cameras flashed each time he adjusted his cufflinks, yet his mind was not fully on Vanessa. He was waiting for another guest. At the very front row sat an empty seat deliberately reserved. He had written the invitation himself and sent it with a smug smile. Amelia Hart, his ex-wife, the woman he had discarded like an old coat, would be forced to sit there and watch as he pledged himself to someone else. Caleb imagined her arriving quietly, maybe in a modest dress, perhaps with sadness clouding her gentle eyes. He imagined her shrinking into the background while he stood triumphant. It was his plan for ultimate humiliation, a final blow to remind her she was nothing without him. As the orchestra played softly and the chatter of the guests rose, a murmur began near the entrance. Heads turned. Outside on Fifth Avenue, the low hum of a luxury engine reached the hall. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop, its presence demanding attention. The chauffeur in white gloves stepped out and opened the door. Every camera shifted instantly, reporters rushing to capture the moment. From the car emerged Amelia Hart. She wore a golden gown that shimmered under the hotel lights. Her hair elegantly styled her face, calm and composed. But it was not only her appearance that froze the room. On each side of her walked a small boy, identical twins, with matching suits and bright, curious eyes. Their tiny hands clung to hers as they entered together, their steps steady and innocent. The entire ballroom fell silent. The string quartet stopped playing, the photographers gasped, and even Vanessa's laughter faded into the background. Caleb's confident smile vanished as his eyes locked on the vision before him. The woman he thought broken had returned transformed, carrying proof of a truth he never wanted to face. Years before the glittering lights of the Plaza Hotel and the headlines about Caleb Donovan's glamorous wedding, the story began in a very different corner of New York City. Caleb was not always a man in Armani suits commanding the attention of investors and socialites. He had grown up in Queens, the son of a bus driver and a nurse, living in a cramped apartment where every dollar had to stretch. From a young age, Caleb carried a hunger to escape the modest life of his parents. He was bright and ambitious, fascinated by computers and software. Nights found him hunched over an old desktop lines of code, glowing on the screen while his mother reminded him to sleep. For Caleb, success meant never again having to explain himself, never again having to feel small. That hunger carried him into Columbia University, where he majored in computer science. He was not the most brilliant student in his class, but he had relentless energy and an ego that needed constant fuel. He dreamed of building something revolutionary, of being known, of having people look at him with awe instead of pity. During those years, he met Amelia Hart. Amelia was nothing like him. She was a student of fine arts at a small liberal arts college, often seen with brushes and sketchbooks, her hands smudged with colors. She had grown up in Brooklyn in a brownstone filled with books, music, and gentle conversations. Her father was a retired professor, her mother a piano teacher, and their home radiated warmth. Amelia carried that warmth everywhere she went. She had a softness in her voice, a tendency to notice small things others overlooked, like the way light filtered through trees or how someone's eyes crinkled when they laughed. When Caleb first saw her at a cafe in Manhattan, she was bent over a notebook sketching the people around her. He was drawn to her calm presence, so different from his restless energy. He introduced himself with the confidence of someone who believed he could win anyone over, and she smiled politely before returning to her sketch. That only intrigued him more. Their relationship grew slowly. Caleb would meet her at that cafe between coding sessions, and she would listen patiently as he talked about algorithms, startup ideas, and dreams of making millions. Amelia encouraged him, but never in the way others did. She did not care about the dollar signs in his sentences. She admired his drive, but often asked him simple questions like whether he was happy or if he had eaten. For Caleb, who was used to measuring himself by achievement, her attention to his humanity felt like a strange kind of luxury. By the time they married, Caleb was still far from wealthy. He was working as a junior programmer for a mid-sized firm, often exhausted and underpaid. Amelia, now teaching art at a small Brooklyn elementary school, supported them both emotionally and financially. Their apartment was modest, the walls decorated with her paintings rather than expensive furniture. Those early years were full of love, but also tension. Caleb hated their lack of money. He wanted sleek cars and penthouse views, while Amelia was content with picnics in Central Park and long walks through the art galleries in Chelsea. He often dragged her to tech conferences where he hoped to network, and she felt out of place among men in suits boasting about funding rounds. She longed for quiet evenings at home, yet she stood by him because she believed in his dreams. The turning point came when Caleb's startup idea caught the attention of a venture capitalist. He had been working nights on a machine learning program designed to optimize logistics for delivery companies. Amelia often brought him sandwiches while he typed furiously, her presence steady, even as he grew more obsessed. When the investor cut a check for $2 million, their lives changed overnight. Caleb quit his job, rented a small office in Soho, and began hiring engineers. Within 3 years, the company's valuations soared. Suddenly, he was no longer the boy from Queens, but the tech golden boy splashed across Forbes. Luxury came quickly. He bought a penthouse overlooking the East River, filled the garage with a Porsche and a Tesla, and wore watches worth more than Amelia's annual salary. For the outside world, it was a fairy tale rise. For Amelia, it marked the beginning of a slow unraveling. Caleb became obsessed with appearances. He took Amelia to lavish parties in Midtown, insisting she wear designer gowns that made her uncomfortable. He would introduce her as his wife with a smile that felt rehearsed, then spend the night discussing deals while she lingered by the buffet. She still loved him, but she began to sense that the man she had married was slipping away, replaced by someone who cared more about being admired than about being loved. Another fracture appeared when they began trying for a child. Amelia longed for a family, for the sound of little feet on hardwood floors. Month after month, the tests were negative. Caleb grew restless and angry. His mother, now enjoying the benefits of his success, called frequently to ask when she would have a grandchild. Caleb transferred that pressure to Amelia, accusing her in bitter arguments of failing him. She tried to explain that they could see specialists, that infertility was complex, that maybe both of them should be tested, but Caleb's pride would not allow it. He declared himself fine and blamed her. Each time she suggested seeing a doctor together, his voice rose in fury. At school, Amelia continued to teach children how to paint sunsets and still lifes, hiding her grief behind a smile. She poured her longing into her students, but each day she returned home to a husband who seemed less like a partner and more like a stranger. Their once tender evenings had been replaced by silent dinners, his eyes glued to his phone as he tracked stock prices and emails from investors. By year 7 of their marriage, the gap between them was a canyon. Caleb saw her as an accessory that no longer sparkled, while Amelia felt invisible. Their backgrounds, once a charming difference, had become a battlefield. He flaunted his penthouse views and designer life, while she clung to memories of sketchbooks and afternoons in Central Park. Beneath the surface, cracks spread wider, waiting for the storm that would break everything apart. The marriage between Caleb and Amelia had begun with promise, but quickly descended into a cycle of bitterness and silent pain. At first, Amelia believed that love could bridge the widening gap between them, but with each passing year, she found herself standing further from the man she once admired. Caleb's company soared to national attention after a lucrative contract with a major retailer, and suddenly his face appeared in business magazines. His speeches featured at tech summits, and his voice carried the authority of a rising mogul. Yet with every accolade came a shift in his demeanor. He no longer sought Amelia's opinion on anything. He sought applause from strangers. He demanded that she attend galas in designer dresses, reminding her that his reputation depended on how radiant she looked at his side. Amelia complied, but felt like an imposter, a mannequin dressed to complement his wealth, rather than a partner cherished for who she was. At home, the tension centered on children. Each month, Amelia hoped, prayed, and tested, only to see disappointment reflected in Caleb's cold eyes. He began to withdraw from her touch, sleeping with his phone under his pillow, working late into the night, as though her presence reminded him only of failure. His mother, emboldened by her son's newfound power, often called Amelia directly. The woman's voice, sharp and judgmental, would cut through the receiver with accusations. "You cannot give my son a child. You are holding him back. You are the curse on his bloodline." Amelia would hang up in tears, confronting Caleb, only to hear him echo the same words. He repeated that a woman without children was incomplete, that she was diminishing his legacy. She reminded him gently of their vows for better or worse, but he dismissed them with laughter, saying vows were meant for people who could produce results. These words scarred Amelia deeply, eroding her sense of worth. Nights became unbearable. Amelia would sit by the window of their penthouse staring at the city lights, wondering how love had transformed into cruelty. She remembered the early days when Caleb had held her hand at the Brooklyn Bridge and whispered about dreams. That man felt like a ghost now. The Caleb she lived with was obsessed with maintaining his image, with proving to the world that he had transcended his humble beginnings. Whenever investors visited, Amelia was paraded like a silent doll expected to smile but never speak. Her paintings, once displayed proudly on their apartment walls, were now hidden in closets, replaced by abstract works, purchased at exorbitant prices because they were fashionable. She felt erased, as though her identity had no place in Caleb's new world. The more he flaunted his cars and watches, the more she realized his hunger for validation could never be satisfied. She attempted to salvage their bond by cooking his favorite meals, planning quiet evenings, or suggesting vacations away from the noise. Each effort was dismissed. He claimed he had no time, that deals waited, that she was wasting his energy. The cruelest moments came during arguments about infertility. One evening after another failed pregnancy test, Caleb threw his glass of whiskey against the wall and shouted that she had stolen years of his life. Amelia trembled, pleading that they see a specialist together. He sneered, saying real men did not need to be tested. He labeled her barren, a word that echoed in her mind like a curse. She retreated into silence, afraid that any word she spoke would ignite another storm. To the outside world, they appeared as a glamorous couple, living the American dream, but behind the polished doors of their penthouse was a marriage suffocating under disdain. Amelia found small escapes in her work. Teaching children art provided her with fleeting joy. She loved watching them discover color, and form loved the innocence of their laughter. Yet even in the classroom, shadows followed her. Parents spoke of family outings of siblings playing together, and each mention of children reminded her of the emptiness waiting at home. She longed for the day she could cradle her own baby, whisper lullabies, and feel that unconditional bond. Caleb interpreted her longing as weakness. He accused her of clinging to fantasies instead of focusing on his social obligations. He told her that if she could not provide a child, at least she should make herself useful by enhancing his image. He wanted her to attend fashion events, to court the media, to play the role of a supportive wife, without complaint. Amelia's gentle protests only fueled his disdain. She began to shrink inward, speaking less, smiling, less, becoming a shadow of the woman she once was. Her friends noticed the change. Sophie, her closest confidant, urged her to leave, but Amelia insisted that marriage was sacred, that maybe God would bless them with a miracle. She endured, telling herself that patience was love. Caleb, however, mistook her patience for weakness. He became more openly cruel. At dinners with associates, he would joke that his wife was beautiful but useless. Laughter would ripple across the table, while Amelia sat frozen, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Later, when she confronted him, he dismissed it as humor, claiming she was too sensitive. The gap widened into an abyss. One evening, after a glamorous gala at which Amelia had forced a smile all night, Caleb returned home intoxicated with success. Standing in the living room, surrounded by glittering city lights, he declared that he needed a partner who could carry his name forward, who could provide heirs to his empire. Amelia whispered that she was trying, that she was not giving up. He responded with words sharp enough to break her spirit completely. Trying is not enough. You are nothing if you cannot give me a son. That night she cried until dawn, her body trembling with despair. She remembered the boy who once looked at her sketches with awe and wondered where he had gone. She felt trapped in a golden cage, surrounded by luxury, yet deprived of affection. The tears soaked her pillow night after night, until her reflection in the mirror showed dark circles and hollow eyes. She was alive but not living. Every interaction with Caleb became a reminder of inadequacy. Every silence between them a wall she could not climb. Their marriage was no longer a partnership, but a prison built from pride, disappointment, and cruelty. For Amelia, it was a long mourning, not for a person who had died, but for the love that had been buried under greed and ego. She endured, hoping for a miracle, but the miracle would not come in the way she imagined. Instead, it would come through truth, through the painful unraveling that would eventually free her from the chains of a marriage drenched in tears. The storm that had been brewing for years finally broke one night on the 32nd floor of Caleb's glass-walled penthouse. The evening air outside was heavy with rain, lightning flashing across the Manhattan skyline, thunder rolling like an omen. Amelia stood by the window, her hands clasped tightly together, watching the city blur beneath streaks of water on the glass. Behind her, the sound of a door slamming announced Caleb's arrival. His tie was pulled loose, his face hard, his steps heavy with irritation. He tossed his car keys onto the marble counter with a sharp clatter, the metallic sound echoing through the silent apartment. 7 years, Amelia. He snapped his voice, cutting through the air like the thunder outside. 7 years of waiting, and still no child. Amelia turned slowly, her voice trembling as she tried to keep calm. Caleb, I have tried. We have tried. It is not in my hands. Maybe we should see another doctor. Maybe there is still hope. Hope. Caleb laughed bitterly, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. Is that what you have been telling yourself every month? Hope, I am tired of hope. My mother calls me every day, asking why you have not given me a son. My friends laugh behind my back. Do you know what it feels like to be mocked as a man with no heir? You have turned me into a fool. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, but she stepped closer, her voice breaking. Please do not speak like that. I am your wife. We made a vow before God, for better, for worse. Why do you throw it at me like I am nothing? Caleb spun around his face, twisted with anger. Because you are nothing to me now. What is a woman who cannot bear children? You eat my food, wear my clothes, ride in my car, yet you cannot give me one son to carry my name. His words hit like blows. Amelia's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stand tall. Do not call me a curse, she whispered. I have prayed, I have cried, I beg God every night to give us a child. Do you think I enjoy this pain? Do you think it makes me happy to feel incomplete? Caleb's eyes burned with fury. Enough of your tears. I will not allow you to waste my life. Tomorrow I will speak to my lawyer. This marriage is finished. The words struck like lightning. Divorce. The sound of it broke through Amelia's chest. You will divorce me after everything. After I stood by you when you had nothing, after I left my family for you. Caleb's jaw tightened. Love cannot produce children. My mother was right. I should have left you long ago. I need a wife who can give me sons, not a woman who fills my house with silence. Amelia fell to her knees, clutching the edge of his trousers, her tears spilling freely. "Please, Caleb, do not do this. Give me more time. Give us more time. God can still answer us." Caleb pulled his leg away, as if her touch disgusted him. "God has nothing to do with this. You are the problem, and I am tired. You will leave. That is final." The rain outside beat against the glass, a soundtrack to her despair. Amelia gasped as though her chest had been struck. "You called your lawyer already?" she asked through broken sobs. "You planned this?" Caleb looked down coldly, picking up his phone. "Yes, I already called. Papers are being prepared. You will be out of this house tomorrow." Amelia stared at him in disbelief, her hands trembling. She rose slowly, her body weak, her heart shattering into pieces. She walked to the wardrobe, each step heavy, and began to fold her clothes into a small suitcase. Her hands shook so much she could barely zip it. Every dress she touched carried memories of birthdays, anniversaries, quiet dinners, laughter that now felt like lies. Caleb stood watching from the doorway, arms crossed his face, a mask of stone. Not once did he move to stop her. Not once did his heart soften. Finally, she lifted the bag, tears streaming down her cheeks, and turned to him one last time. "Caleb, you will regret this," she whispered. "One day you will see the truth. One day you will understand what you have done." But Caleb looked away, as if she were already gone. With slow steps, she walked across the penthouse, the wheels of the suitcase dragging against the polished wooden floor. The apartment that once felt like home now felt like a prison. She passed the maids in the hallway, their eyes lowered, whispering among themselves, but none daring to interfere. She pushed open the heavy front door, and the cold night air hit her face. Rain soaked her hair, her clothes, her suitcase. She paused for a moment, glancing back at the towering glass walls of the life she was leaving behind. Her voice broke into the darkness. "I may be leaving with nothing, but I will not remain broken. My God will fight for me." Then she stepped into the rain, her silhouette swallowed by the storm. She walked aimlessly down the slick streets of Manhattan, neon signs reflecting off puddles, her tears indistinguishable from the rain on her cheeks. Every step echoed with Caleb's words, "You are nothing. You are barren. You are a curse." She clutched her suitcase to her chest, as if it could hold together the pieces of her heart. She passed closed shops, homeless men under awnings, taxis, splashing water onto the curb. The city that had once felt full of possibility now felt vast and cruel. But she kept walking, each step carrying her further from the man who had broken her. Each step whispering a vow that though shattered, she was not finished. In the shadows of New York that night, Amelia's life as Caleb's wife ended, and the painful journey toward becoming her own woman truly began. The rain-soaked night, when Amelia walked away from Caleb's penthouse, marked the death of one life and the painful birth of another. She had nothing but a suitcase and a heart fractured beyond recognition. Yet in that emptiness was a seed of resilience she could not yet see. Her first steps were to Sophie's apartment, a modest 2-bedroom walk, up in Brooklyn where the scent of chamomile tea and the clutter of medical textbooks welcomed her into safety. Sophie had been Amelia's friend since college, now working long shifts as a resident doctor, and she opened her door at nearly midnight to find Amelia shivering on the landing, suitcase, dripping water, eyes swollen from tears. Without asking questions, Sophie pulled her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and let her collapse into sobs. For days, Amelia could not eat or speak. She lay curled on Sophie's couch, the television muted in the background, her thoughts consumed by the words Caleb had hurled at her. His accusations repeated, like poison-barren curse nothing. Sophie tried gently to coax her into conversation, but Amelia's voice was a whisper. I gave him everything, she confessed one evening. I left my family, I gave up dreams, I believed in him when no one else did, and he threw me away like trash. Sophie clasped her hand firmly. No, she said he threw away a diamond because he was blind. Amelia let the words settle, unsure if she believed them. But slowly Sophie's steadfast presence began to lift her from the fog. After 2 weeks, Sophie insisted Amelia go with her to the hospital for a checkup. At first, Amelia resisted. She had convinced herself she was the problem, that tests would only confirm her worst fears. Yet Sophie was unrelenting. You have spent years carrying guilt that may not even belong to you, she said. It is time for the truth. Reluctantly, Amelia agreed. The sterile white walls of the clinic felt cold, the scent of antiseptic sharp in her nose. Dr. Patel, a compassionate woman in her 40s, listened to Amelia's story with quiet attention. 7 years of marriage, no pregnancy, blamed constantly by her husband. Dr. Patel ordered a full panel of tests, blood work, ultrasounds, hormone analysis. Amelia endured the procedures with her stomach in knots, convinced the results would condemn her. When she returned 2 days later, she sat on the edge of her chair, hands sweating. Dr. Patel looked over the results carefully, then smiled softly. Amelia, everything looks perfect. Your reproductive system is healthy, your hormone levels normal. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Amelia blinked the words, refusing to register. Nothing wrong. The doctor repeated, firm but kind. If there was no pregnancy in all those years, I strongly advise that your ex-husband be tested. From what I see, you are completely fine. Tears spilled from Amelia's eyes, her shoulders trembling. All those nights of praying, all those days of self-loathing, and it had never been her. Sophie gripped her hand tightly. Do you hear that you were never the problem? Amelia broke into sobs, relief and rage twisting together. She remembered every insult, every look of contempt from Caleb, every time his mother spat the word barren. The truth was like sunlight, piercing through storm clouds. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of freedom. That night, she lay awake in Sophie's spare room, staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside, but within her chest, something new stirred. She whispered to herself, I am not broken, I am not cursed, I am free. The following weeks were the beginning of her rebirth. She still wept at odd moments, memories ambushing her in the middle of making tea or walking down the street, but alongside the grief was determination. She applied for a part-time job teaching art classes at a community center in Queens. The center served children from immigrant families, many of them shy or struggling in school. Amelia threw herself into the work. She taught them how to blend colors, how to draw what they felt, rather than what they saw, how to find beauty in mistakes. The children adored her. They ran to hug her when she arrived, their laughter filling the air with a joy that mended small pieces of her heart. Slowly, her days regained rhythm. She woke early to sketch lesson plans, spent afternoons surrounded by crayons and paint, and returned to Sophie's apartment in the evenings tired but content. She began to laugh again, small chuckles at Sophie's sarcastic jokes. soft smiles when a child presented her with a crooked but proud painting. The community center director noticed her dedication and offered her more classes. For the first time in years, Amelia felt purposeful. She still lived with little, her suitcase of clothes, a few sketchbooks, and Sophie's kindness, but her spirit was no longer hollow. She was creating something meaningful, not for Caleb, not for appearances, but for herself and the children, who looked at her with trust. Yet the shadows of the past were not so easily erased. One evening, as she was cleaning brushes, a mother asked, "Do you have children of your own?" The question pierced her like a blade. She forced a smile and shook her head. Not yet. That night she cried quietly into her pillow, the ache of longing still raw. But unlike before, she did not collapse into despair. She remembered the doctor's words, healthy, normal, nothing wrong. Hope no longer felt like a cruel trick. It felt like a quiet promise, waiting for the right time. To channel her healing further, Amelia began painting again. She had abandoned her art during the darkest years of her marriage, but now canvases reappeared in Sophie's living room. She painted cityscapes in bold colors, portraits of children at the center, abstract swirls of pain and release. Each stroke was therapy. Sophie often returned from late shifts to find her covered in paint, eyes glowing with focus. "You are coming back," Sophie would say with a smile, and Amelia would nod, feeling it too. Her journey of rebirth deepened when the community center organized an exhibition of student art. Amelia curated the show, hanging paintings in neat rows, inviting parents and neighbors. On the night of the event, the modest hall was filled with laughter, applause, and the smell of homemade food. Amelia stood in the corner, watching children beam with pride, and for the first time in years, she felt joy that was not shadowed by Caleb's contempt. Here she was, shaping young lives, standing in her own strength. As the applause echoed, Amelia whispered to herself, "I survived. I am building again." News of her work spread slowly through the neighborhood. A journalist from a local paper wrote an article about the art classes, transforming the lives of underprivileged children. Amelia's name appeared in print not as the wife of a wealthy man, but as a woman of her own making. She clipped the article and pinned it above her desk, a symbol of how far she had come. Yet even as her world expanded, the past occasionally clawed at her. She saw Caleb's face on billboards advertising tech conferences, his name trending on social media for raising millions in new funding. Each time she felt a twist in her stomach. But instead of collapsing, she turned back to her brushes, her students, her new path. She was learning to let his shadow fade. Months passed, seasons shifted. Autumn leaves turned the city gold, then snow dusted rooftops. Amelia's life, once measured by Caleb's moods, now followed the rhythm of her own choices. She rented a small studio apartment not far from Sophie, filling it with canvases, second-hand furniture, and plants on the windowsill. It was not glamorous, but it was hers. On quiet evenings, she lit candles, sipped tea, and felt peace in the solitude. The loneliness was real, but it was no longer crushing. It was space for her to rediscover who she was. In her journal, she wrote often words tumbling out in ink. "I am more than a womb. I am more than what he said. I am worthy of love." These affirmations became anchors pulling her back when doubt threatened. Her healing was not linear. There were nights she still woke with tears, dreams of Caleb's harsh voice ringing in her ears, but with each dawn, she rose stronger. Her rebirth was a process, not a single moment. and she was walking it step by step. It was during the spring exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art that Amelia's path shifted again. The community center had submitted a few of her students' pieces to a program for young artists, and she accompanied them proudly, guiding them through the towering glass doors of MoMA. The children's eyes widened at the massive canvases and sculptures, their laughter echoing in the grand halls. Amelia wore a simple navy dress, her hair tied back neatly, her presence understated among the glittering crowd of patrons and critics. While the children admired a gallery of impressionist works, a man approached her quietly, his gaze lingering not on the art, but on the woman who stood with such gentle pride. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a calm gravitas that set him apart from the chatter of donors. His suit was impeccable, but not flashy, his watch elegant but subtle, his demeanor that of someone who did not need to prove anything. Ethan Cole introduced himself with a voice, deep and steady. "I noticed the children," he said. "Their work is remarkable, but more than that, I noticed how they look at you. You must be their teacher." Amelia nodded modest. "I run the community art classes in Queens. They worked hard for this exhibition." Ethan smiled faintly. "I can see that. I am on the board here, and I believe programs like yours are the soul of the art world." His eyes, gray with a hint of warmth, studied her with genuine interest, not the superficial glance she was used to from Caleb's circles. He asked thoughtful questions about her methods, her students, her dreams for expanding the classes. Amelia, unused to such attention, found herself speaking more than she expected. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, smiling when she grew animated about a child's progress. At the end of the evening, he handed her his card. "If you ever need support, reach out. Art deserves champions, and so do those who teach it." She slipped the card into her purse, not realizing in that moment how significant it would become. Over the following weeks, Ethan kept his word. A donation arrived at the community center with no fanfare enough to buy new supplies easels and even fund a summer program. Amelia wrote to thank him, expecting a polite reply, but instead he invited her for coffee. They met in Bryant Park on a crisp Saturday morning, surrounded by blooming tulips and the hum of the city waking up. Ethan arrived in a simple sweater and jeans, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate instead of coffee. "I remember you said you were not much of a coffee drinker," he explained with a smile. Amelia felt a warmth spread through her chest at the thoughtfulness. They sat on a bench watching children chase pigeons and spoke not of business but of life. Ethan shared that he was 40 widowed young after losing his wife to illness. He had thrown himself into his family's publishing empire for years, but had recently turned his energy toward supporting arts and education. He confessed he had been captivated by the way Amelia carried herself at MoMA, calm yet strong, her focus always on others rather than herself. Their conversations stretched into hours. He told her stories of summers in the Hamptons, of evenings at the opera, of the quiet library in his brownstone filled with first editions. Amelia, in turn, spoke of growing up in Brooklyn, of sketching in parks, of the heartbreak that had nearly broken her. Ethan did not flinch at her honesty. Instead, he listened with a stillness that felt like balm to her wounds. He never pressed, never judged, simply let her words rest in the space between them. In the weeks that followed, their meetings became a rhythm. Dinner at a quiet bistro in Greenwich Village, A walk across the Brooklyn Bridge at dusk, the city lights shimmering below. Hot chocolate again in winter at the Bryant Park rink, where they laughed watching children stumble on skates. Amelia began to feel something she had thought lost forever safe. With Ethan, there were no sharp words, no demands for perfection, no constant pressure to prove her worth. He admired her not as an accessory, but as a woman with depth, with dreams, with a quiet strength forged in pain. One evening, he joined her at the community center, sitting on a small stool as children crowded around him. He asked about their paintings, complimented their colors, even tried clumsily to sketch a flower, sending the children into giggles. Amelia watched him, her heart swelling at the sight of a man powerful in the world, yet gentle enough to kneel on the floor beside a child. That night, as he walked her home, she found herself confessing her lingering fears. "I am afraid to trust again," she whispered. "I am afraid of being broken twice." Ethan stopped under a streetlight, his eyes steady. "I understand," he said softly. "I lost someone I loved once, and I thought my heart would never open again. But then I met you. I do not want to rush you. I only want you to know that I see you, Amelia, not what you can give me, not what you can do for me. Just you." She felt tears gather in her eyes, not of pain, but of something unfamiliar hope. In his presence, she realized what true strength looked like. It was not in the loud boasting of Caleb's new money arrogance. It was in the quiet confidence of Ethan Cole, a man rooted in generations of stability, who did not need to shout his worth because it spoke through every action. Slowly, Amelia allowed herself to lean in to the possibility of love again. It was not a whirlwind or a fairy tale, but a steady growing warmth like spring following a brutal winter. With Ethan, she found laughter again, she found peace again, and most of all, she found the courage to believe that love could be real. Months passed as Amelia and Ethan's relationship deepened a quiet rhythm of companionship that gave her a sense of stability she had never known. He accompanied her to art shows, brought her flowers without ceremony, and sometimes simply sat beside her in silence while she painted. It was in those small gestures that she realized what love was supposed to feel like. Not grand declarations meant for spectators, but a steady presence that held her up when she faltered. One evening, as they walked along the East River, Ethan wrapped his coat around her shoulders against the cold wind. She leaned into him, and for the first time in years, she felt safe enough to dream of a future. A few months later, Amelia began to notice subtle changes in her body. At first, she dismissed them as stress or exhaustion, but when morning nausea became routine, Sophie insisted she see a doctor. Amelia sat nervously in the clinic, Ethan at her side, his hand warm in hers. The doctor returned with a smile. "Congratulations, you are pregnant." Amelia froze tears springing to her eyes. She turned to Ethan, her voice trembling. "Did you hear that I am pregnant?" Ethan's expression softened into joy as he pulled her into his arms. "We are going to be parents," he whispered into her hair. She clutched him tightly, overwhelmed. After years of being branded barren, the word pregnant felt like redemption carved into her soul. But the miracle had only begun. Weeks later, at their first ultrasound, the doctor's brows lifted in surprise. "Amelia, there are 2 heartbeats, twins." The room spun as Amelia gasped. 2. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Ethan laughed a deep, unrestrained laugh that filled the sterile room. 2. We are doubly blessed. He kissed her forehead, his eyes shining with awe. Amelia lay back on the table, watching the small flickering lights of her baby's hearts on the screen, and she felt as though God himself had reached down to vindicate her. The news changed everything. Ethan immediately began making preparations. His townhouse in Manhattan was transformed into a home ready for children. He oversaw the design of a nursery painted in soft blues and creams, with shelves for books and toys and twin cribs positioned side by side. Amelia helped choose stuffed animals and mobiles, her hands lingering on tiny clothes that made her cry with gratitude. Sophie, overjoyed, promised to be godmother and threw Amelia a baby shower filled with laughter and warmth. Amelia's pregnancy was not easy. There were days of exhaustion and swollen feet, nights when she cried from fear, but Ethan was steadfast. He attended every doctor's appointment, held her hair back when she was sick, and whispered encouragement when her doubts returned. Whenever she feared repeating Caleb's cruelty, Ethan would take her face gently in his hands and say, "You are not defined by the past. These children are our future, and you are the strongest woman I know." The months rolled by, and with each passing week, Amelia's belly grew a visible testament to her second chance at life. Strangers on the street smiled at her glow. The children at her art classes painted pictures of babies and families just for her. For Amelia, each kick inside her womb was a reminder that she had been wronged but not defeated. Her body had never been broken. It had been waiting for the right love, the right time, the right truth. When the day of delivery arrived, it was a Saturday morning in early spring. The hospital room bustled with nurses' monitors beeping steadily. Ethan never left her side, holding her hand as Amelia labored with courage. Hours of pain culminated in the cry of the first twin, then moments later, the second. 2 boys, healthy and strong. Amelia wept as the nurse placed them on her chest. They were tiny, their skin soft and pink, their cries fierce and insistent. She kissed their foreheads, her tears falling onto their small faces. "I am not barren," she whispered. "I am a mother." Ethan bent over her, tears in his eyes, as he cradled one of the boys. "They are perfect," he murmured. "You did it, Amelia. You gave me a family." She looked up at him, exhausted yet radiant. "No," she said softly. "We did it together." The days that followed were filled with sleepless nights and overwhelming joy. Ethan changed diapers with surprising skill, often humming softly to calm the babies. Amelia rocked them in the nursery, her heart swelling each time their tiny hands clutched her finger. Sophie visited often, helping with midnight feedings and reminding Amelia that she was stronger than she realized. The townhouse, once elegant but quiet, now rang with the sounds of new life. Every coo and cry was a song of healing. Social media eventually buzzed with whispers. Someone spotted Amelia walking with a stroller near Central Park, Ethan by her side, protective and proud. Photos spread, but Amelia did not care. For the first time, she felt no shame, no need to hide. She had her children, her partner, her peace. Late one evening, Amelia stood by the nursery window, the city lights twinkling outside. The twins slept soundly, their breaths synchronized their chests, rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Can you believe this is our life now?" he whispered. She leaned back against him, tears glistening in her eyes. "I thought I lost everything," she murmured, "but I gained more than I ever dreamed." Ethan kissed her temple. "This is just the beginning." Amelia smiled, her gaze fixed on her sons. The miracle of their existence was more than an answer to years of prayers. It was proof that love could heal, that truth could set her free, and that even the deepest wounds could give way to joy. She had been broken, but now she was whole. She had been silenced, but now she was a mother with a voice stronger than ever. And as she watched her twins sleep, Amelia vowed that they would grow up never doubting their worth, never questioning their place in the world. They were her redemption, her triumph, her miracle. While Amelia's life was quietly blossoming into love and family, Caleb Donovan was staging a spectacle meant to outshine every headline in Manhattan. Though still wealthy, his insecurity had only grown. His startup continued to rake in millions. His penthouse sparkled with glass and chrome, and his garage held the latest sports cars yet. Inside, he was restless. Success had filled his bank account, but not his soul. He craved validation, the same applause that had fueled him from the start, and nothing embodied that hunger more than his relationship with Vanessa Monroe, a 20-something supermodel who lived on magazine covers and Instagram reels. She was tall, beautiful, and obsessed with luxury. To Caleb, she was the ultimate trophy. To Vanessa, Caleb was a stepping stone to cement her status beyond the runway. Together, they were a match made in spectacle, not substance. The plan was a wedding unlike any other. The Plaza Hotel was booked for the entire weekend. Red carpets were laid across Fifth Avenue. Floral arrangements from Paris arrived in crates. The guest list read like a Vanity Fair spread. Celebrities, venture capitalists, social media influencers, even a senator or two. The event was branded online as the wedding of the year, and Caleb relished every headline. He spent hours with his planner, ensuring every chandelier sparkled, every camera angle captured his grandeur. Every plate of food was curated by Michelin-starred chefs, yet beneath the rehearsed confidence, a gnawing thought haunted him. He had ensured Amelia Hart received an invitation. He insisted on it personally, even when the planner raised an eyebrow. He wanted her there, sitting in the front row, forced to watch him pledge himself to someone younger, richer in fame, and adored by the world. In Caleb's mind, it was the ultimate victory over the woman who had once walked out of his life with only a suitcase. He imagined her shrinking in her seat, drowning in humiliation, while cameras flashed around her. It would confirm to everyone and to himself that leaving her had been the right choice. The day arrived with fanfare. Social media buzzed with the hashtag Caleb and Vanessa clips of the decor and guest arrivals going viral within minutes. Outside the plaza, paparazzi jostled for shots of celebrities arriving in limousines. Inside the ballroom gleamed with gold accents the orchestra-tuned instruments, and Caleb paced the altar in his Armani suit, embroidered with custom details, smiling at every camera that found him. Vanessa, preparing upstairs in a diamond-encrusted gown imported from Milan, posted stories to her millions of followers, her veil cascading around her like a waterfall. Everything was going to plan until a new sound rippled through the crowd gathered in the hall. A low hum of a powerful engine outside silenced the chatter. Guests turned as a black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop in front of the entrance. It was not on the schedule. The chauffeur stepped out, opening the rear door with deliberate grace. The photographers pivoted instantly, their flashes popping like fireworks. From the car emerged Amelia Hart, She wore a golden gown that shimmered like sunlight. Against the marble steps, her hair arranged elegantly, her face radiant with calm. On each side of her walked two small boys, dressed in matching suits, with tiny bow ties, their hands firmly in hers. Gasps filled the ballroom as whispers spread like wildfire. "That is his ex-wife," someone murmured. "And those children, are they hers?" Cameras swiveled to capture every angle as Amelia entered her steps. Steady, her chin high. The twins looked around with innocent curiosity, their wide eyes mirroring their mother's quiet strength. Amelia did not falter, did not glance around nervously. She walked with dignity straight to the seat Caleb had reserved for her. The front row, her presence commanding the attention of every person in the hall. Caleb's smile froze his throat, tightening as though the air had been stolen. Vanessa, watching from the entrance upstairs, frowned as her bridesmaids whispered in shock. She turned sharply to her assistant. "Those kids, whose are they?" the assistant stammered. "They are Amelia's." Vanessa's eyes widened. "Amelia's. You told me she was barren," she hissed later when she reached Caleb at the altar. Caleb's face paled, his voice stammering. "I thought she was." That was what he stopped, unable to form excuses, under the weight of hundreds of eyes. Vanessa stepped back, her gaze darting between Caleb and the serene figure of Amelia, seated calmly with her sons. The pastor cleared his throat nervously. "Shall we begin?" But the room was already unraveling. Guests whispered loudly. Cameras captured Caleb's trembling hands. On social media, clips exploded in real time. Amelia Hart entering the plaza with twins, hashtags multiplying by the second. Vanessa's composure cracked. "You lied to me," she said, her voice sharp but controlled enough for the microphone to catch. "You told me she could not have children." Caleb's face glistened with sweat under the lights. "I believed it," he muttered. "That is what No Vanessa," interrupted, her voice rising. "You never even tested yourself, did you? You blamed her because your pride could not handle the truth." The crowd erupted into murmurs. Phones captured every word. Vanessa turned away, lifting the edge of her gown. "I will not be humiliated, not like this. Not with lies." She dropped her bouquet at the altar, the thud echoing like a verdict, and marched out of the hall, her bridesmaids scrambling after her. The orchestra stopped. The cameras froze on Caleb's face as humiliation washed over him in waves. Amelia remained seated, her sons leaning against her, her calm expression contrasting sharply with Caleb's unraveling. She did not gloat, did not smile triumphantly. She simply sat, a living truth, undeniable and powerful. Caleb stumbled forward, his voice weak. "Amelia," he whispered across the hall. But she did not answer. Her eyes were steady, her presence louder than any words. The guests had come expecting a glittering spectacle of power and wealth. Instead, they witnessed a man undone by his own lies, and a woman redeemed by her quiet strength. Clips of Vanessa leaving, Amelia arriving, and Caleb stammering spread across the internet within minutes. Hashtags trended: ex-wife glow-up twins, at the wedding truth, at the plaza. Millions watched as the story of Amelia Hart's dignity and Caleb Donovan's downfall unfolded in real time. The sweet revenge was not in words shouted or vengeance plotted. It was in Amelia's silent arrival, her golden gown shimmering as she held her son's hands and sat exactly where Caleb had placed her, turning his plan for humiliation into his own undoing. By the end of the night, Caleb was left standing at the altar alone, his wedding, a collapsed spectacle, his reputation in ruins. while Amelia left the hall in the same Rolls-Royce. Her sons beside her, her dignity intact, her life already far beyond his reach. By the next morning, Caleb Donovan's wedding was no longer a private humiliation contained within the gilded walls of the plaza, but a global spectacle dissected by millions. Every platform from Instagram to TikTok overflowed with clips of Amelia stepping out of the Rolls-Royce in her golden gown, her twins flanking her like living proof of the truth. Comment sections exploded with praise for her dignity and condemnation for Caleb's arrogance. Headlines screamed phrases like "ex-wife returns," "in triumph," and "groom exposed at the altar." What Caleb had intended as a performance of power had become his public undoing. Investors who once scrambled to be photographed with him now sent hurried emails withdrawing support. Several key clients quietly canceled contracts, citing reputational risk. In the volatile world of tech startups, image was currency, and Caleb's had plummeted overnight. The very journalists he had invited to glorify his union with Vanessa Monroe now published scathing think pieces about pride, misogyny, and the dangers of unchecked ego. His carefully built facade crumbled with each refresh of his feed. Caleb wandered through his penthouse like a ghost. The rooms that once symbolized achievement now echoed with emptiness. He poured whiskey at noon, staring out over the Manhattan skyline that no longer felt like a victory, but a mockery. Screens across the city replayed his disgrace, while his phone buzzed with unanswered calls from his mother, whose fury now included not only his failure to produce heirs, but also the humiliation of being known as the mother of the man, exposed as infertile. Caleb could not bring himself to answer. He switched off his phone, but the silence was worse because it left him alone with memory. He saw Amelia kneeling, begging him not to leave years ago, and himself pulling away with disdain. He heard his own voice calling her barren, a curse, worthless, and then he saw her again at the wedding, radiant and unbroken, with the children that proved everything he had ever said was a lie. The contrast shredded him. Pride had carried him high, but now it was dragging him down. Vanessa Monroe's departure was swift and final. Within 24 hours, she posted a statement on her social media declaring she would not marry a man who built his empire on lies. Her millions of followers applauded her decision, and brands that had lined up to partner with Caleb's wedding now distanced themselves from his name. Caleb sat in his silent penthouse, the bouquet Vanessa had dropped at the altar replaying in his mind like a gavel. He had wanted Amelia to sit in shame, but it was he who now bore the weight of ridicule. Across the city, Amelia rocked her sons to sleep in Ethan's townhouse, the hum of contentment filling rooms built with love. She did not gloat. She did not even mention Caleb. She had already moved forward, while Caleb was chained to the wreckage of his own making. Alone at night, he scrolled through the endless footage, his hands shaking his throat tight. Comment after comment declared Amelia a queen, a symbol of grace and strength. His name was dragged through digital mud as a cautionary tale of arrogance. Caleb buried his face in his hands, realizing too late that the woman he had cast aside had been the only real treasure he ever possessed. Now she belonged to a world he could no longer touch, while he remained trapped in a palace that felt emptier than the night she walked out with her suitcase into the rain. Spring sunlight filtered through the trees in Central Park. As Amelia strolled along, the winding path her twins darting ahead with carefree laughter. Their small hands clutched kites that bobbed and dipped in the breeze, their voices rising in shouts of delight. Beside her walked Ethan, his hand steady in hers, his gaze filled with quiet pride. The city bustled beyond the park's edges, but here the world felt still safe, almost sacred. Amelia breathed deeply, her chest light, her spirit free. She remembered the woman who had once walked through the rain carrying a suitcase, her heart broken, her future uncertain. That woman had cried herself to sleep, believing she was nothing, believing she was cursed. And yet here she was now, her son's laughter ringing in the air, a man who loved her without condition. At her side, her own heart whole again. Ethan paused to adjust one of the boy's kites, kneeling to show him how to angle it toward the wind. Amelia watched, tears pricking her eyes, not from sorrow but from gratitude. She stepped closer, whispering as though confessing a secret to the universe. I thought I lost everything, but I gained a real life. Ethan rose, brushing his hands, and looked at her with a smile that said he understood. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders as the twins ran back toward them, cheeks flushed with joy. Together they walked beneath the canopy of trees, the golden light dappling across their path. Amelia felt the weight of the past lift with every step, replaced by a certainty that love built on truth could withstand anything. She had been discarded, humiliated, left to believe she was broken, but she had risen from the ashes, not with vengeance, but with grace. The city skyline gleamed in the distance, a reminder of all she had endured and all she had overcome. Her life was no longer defined by Caleb Donovan's arrogance or his lies. It was defined by her resilience, her children, and the man who had shown her what real love looked like. As the twins tugged at their hands, demanding ice cream, Amelia laughed freely, the sound pure and unburdened. The chapter of pain had closed, a new one had begun, filled with family hope, and the kind of happiness that could never be bought or faked. And in that moment, beneath the soft glow of the afternoon sun, Amelia knew she was finally home. Dear Emma's Stories family, if Amelia's journey from heartbreak to healing touched something deep inside you, then this is the moment I want to invite you into our circle of stories, where love, resilience, and redemption always find their way back to the light. Imagine sitting with us every week, hearing tales that make your heart race, your eyes tear up, and your spirit rise again, reminding you that no matter how dark the night feels, dawn is always waiting. That is what this channel is about, bringing you romance dramas with the intensity of real life and the sweetness of justice, finely served, giving you not only entertainment, but also hope that love can be both tender and powerful. So here is my invitation: if you believe that stories have the power to heal, to inspire, and to connect us across distances, then do not let this be the last time we share a moment together. Subscribe now so you never miss the next tale. Click the bell so you are the first to join when a new chapter drops, and let us grow this community of dreamers and believers who crave stories with real emotion. And because stories are conversations, not just performances, I want to hear from you. What was the moment in Amelia's journey that hit you the hardest? Was it her walk through the rain with only a suitcase? Was it the ultrasound with 2 heartbeats blinking on the screen? Or was it that golden Rolls-Royce entrance at the plaza that flipped humiliation into triumph? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I read every word and your insights help me craft even more powerful narratives that speak to your heart. While you are here, do not forget to rate this story from 0 to 10, because your feedback shapes what comes next, and it is your voice that makes this space alive. And one more thing, tell us where you are watching from, because I love knowing how far this family reaches. Whether you are in a small town in Texas, a busy street in New York, or across the ocean in London, we are united by the stories we share. So if you are ready for more tales of love found in unexpected places of revenge, served sweeter than honey, of characters who rise from despair to dignity, then stay with us. The best is yet to come, and I promise you, every story will leave you holding your breath and believing in love again.